Hello and welcome to the September 2024 State of the Union. I mentioned that we have our caging results in, and as usual, this is from our RNG facilities. We have some data for year over year, and then for looking back 3 years, there's a smaller set of organizations, but we're using only organizations that had data for all of those 3 years for August. So 52 organizations had data from 2023 and 2024, but not 22. So we saw an 8% decline in revenue, 12% decline in gifts. In August, we had been seeing that month things clicking back up the past few months, and August did not fit into that trend, unfortunately. Average gift was up 4%. That's how you have 12% decline in gifts and only an 8% decline in revenue. There were a couple of sectors that had year-over-year revenue growth for August. Our faith communities, our hospitals, international affairs, but some down significantly. You can see law enforcement, health and disease, and miscellaneous down by almost a third in some cases. So definitely some differences by sector. Also likely some differences in mailing schedules and how these things came about. But as we celebrated July and June, we should take a hard look at August as well. And obviously down from the highs from post-COVID era. Any questions on any of that? Man, let me just do a quick check. We have anyone from More Digital on? Wanted to check. Otherwise, I will cover their year-end digital tips. Okay. So for Giving Tuesday, this is actually our memo out to agencies and what we're recommending folks do internally. And we said this is too good not to share. So I'm trying to share some of this out. The gift day brand elements we've seen work well as part of creative executions, just because there is sorry, looks like I flipped out there for a second. I'm going to turn off my video. I'm on hotel Wi-Fi, so you are not missing much anyway. So let me share my screen again. Okay. So many of you who saw our report on 2023 Giving Tuesday saw that we are recommending matches, and that match math when possible. Your gift multiplied will do X more, creates that urgency on the day. And there are some ways to work it even if you don't have a corporate match. I know back in the day I used to pre-solicit a challenge fund from some of our bigger donors. And they liked the idea that what they had would be matched on the back end. So it works both ways. Late in the day, that dynamic countdown clock, we have this much time left, is important. Having a goal gives people something to shoot for. Yes, some artificiality to the urgency, but it is only one day, and we are trying to break through. Now, for-profit companies are trying to get in on, Travel Tuesday and things like that. Having a campaign thank you message built in as a communication afterwards. One of the things that we were discussing actually here at TNPA Leadership Summit yesterday is people who give on Giving Tuesday retain better than almost any other donors. And last day of the year is actually a little better, but still very high. And for a day that could be considered transactional, the ability to come in and make it non-transactional is very helpful. So email, making sure that you're tying into the mission, but also getting to the point. We do recommend multiple ad versions at the same time for paid social and display, just to make sure that we are getting advantage of it. Any testing, pre-testing elements of the creative is sometimes helpful. You know, you have your Giving Tuesday message, but to know what your general message is going in, taking your best performing images and things like that, using them when they're critical is pretty important. Because as this third bullet point says, if you're doing things that aren't Giving Tuesday on Giving Tuesday, it's got to be really important, and app should likely have a separate budget. I know gosh, when I started out and when Giving Tuesday started out, I was a bit of a skeptic, but people have really embraced it. And so clearing the decks for that type of messaging when possible is important. Having no fewer than 3 day of sends, an AM, a PM, a late PM. We're seeing a lot of even very late messages, like one client who had a 10% of their revenue came off of one email, sent at 11 p.m. at Eastern. And because it's concentrated in one day, falls forward, or did you get this, or those sorts of things, help with your budget as well. Speaking of year end, we do anticipate that will perform a little bit better this year. It's falling on a weekday, and so that gives us an opportunity that we did not have last year, where it was on a weekend. It still was up, but up more slightly than it usually is. We also did see a long tail into January, possibly because of that weekend status. So people were just getting over their hangovers when they're reading your emails. On Jan 1, we do still see those campaigns making money thereafter. We've all been wondering about the election impact. Here we talked about it in the general context of looking over 60 years of Giving USA data. We're not seeing any deleterious effects of presidential election giving leading to decreased giving in other places. We've talked about it on this call, how political giving is a smaller part of it. One additional thing that our friends over at Giving Tuesday, their chief data officer, said is we're seeing correlations, not substitutions, when people give politically, when people volunteer, when people do crowdfunding campaigns, when they take advocacy actions. All of those are positively correlated with them taking other gifts. That said, there are some impacts on the election. Media prices are going up during October. There will be a blackout period that Meta ads, we want to make sure that all November ads are launched by October 25th. We don't know how long election day will last. There could very well be a blackout extended into farther into November as parties jostle, let's say. I know many of us on this call are looking for a clean victory one way or the other. The data would tend to indicate it's going to be a pretty close race. For messaging on the election, if you have messaging that's election day focused, you want to make sure that you have that out ahead of time, but you do want to make sure that you're able to adapt. We want to appear relevant. We're talking about uncertain times, kind of like we did in COVID. People will understand what we're talking about. We don't need to talk directly about the election. We can say, regardless of what's going on in the country, or you can agree that this mission is important. And so reading the room, but not getting off on a sidetrack. That's how I'd frame this. For January, there is a resting and a thinking period, reporting back to say, we made our goal, here's what we've been able to do for it. Ramping up, infographics are great for this, wrap-up reports are good for this, video is good for this. All of these are ways of saying your support greatly appreciated. Here's what we were able to do with it. We just appreciate the heck out of you. And then Sustainer asks, because getting them in earlier the year brings in more revenue. There's also, they reference a new year, new me effect on this. There is something called the fresh start effect, where people are more likely to start diets or plans or those sorts of things, especially on the new year, especially monumental birthdays, sometimes beginning of school year, beginnings of months, you can even see this. And so a fresh start to your giving can be effective messaging for monthly giving. Any questions on any of that? Want to thank our More Digital folks for putting it all together. Feel free to shout out any questions by taking yourself off mute or throwing them into the chat.
I have a question on the monthly giving push.
Yes.
What are the best channels, would you all say, to do that in?
I would say that is one that you can shift a lot of your digital channels to. I mean, things like CTV and video advertising probably won't leave monthly giving, but it's good for display ads. It's good for email. It can even be for your text responsive donors, an opportunity to try to switch them over as well because of that fresh start effect. And because it's not just us that wants to increase the impact of our donors' gifts. One of the tests I remember running back in the day was we took convenience messages, here's why monthly giving is good for you, and put them against monthly giving messages that were, here's why it will help this organization do more with your gift, and will help this organization do more with your gift one every time. And so people over, you won't get solicited, you won't forget about it. Those sorts of messages don't work as well as we'll have this, we'll be able to budget for it. It will be here in cases of emergencies. And yes, in January, it'll be here the whole year round. So don't know that there is a bad digital channel to go with for monthly giving. And in fact, there's some data, and this has waned a little bit over the past 2 years, but still largely true, that Giving Tuesday can be an effective monthly giving ask time. I remember there was data that if you annualized the income of people who made their first monthly donations on Giving Tuesday, it almost added up to all of the one-time donations that came in that day.
Wow.
So there's an opportunity there as well. But it's probably part of, that's definitely going to be a more subordinate part of your messaging.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Okay. And a couple of interesting tests, not exactly from the fundraising world, but still hopefully effective ones. So both of these studies are from Nature this month. The first one is about fact checking. And please note that I did pick these topics before any of the debates. These just happen to be things that I put aside for test of the month. And here we are. So fact checking. Researchers say, generally we find that fact checking works, that type of, we've determined this not to be trustworthy label can be effective in stopping people from sharing, but does it work for everyone? There are a lot of people who say, I don't trust fact checkers, and there's the potential for a blowback effect. I'm going to share this even harder because the man or whoever tells me it ain't so. So these folks said they tested trust of fact checking They created an index of questions that indicated your trust level, and then they validated it and found that it correlated with all of the things that correlate with the distrust of fact checking, which is usually things like lower education levels, lower media literacy, those sorts of things. So the test of the fact checking measure trust was a good one. And so then they ran experiments on 14,000 people where they gave them both true and false news posts. They asked them about their likelihood of sharing the post and how accurate the headline was. Some people received no warning labels, and some people received warning labels on most of the false posts. And they used warning labels that were similar, but not actionably similar to Facebook's. So using kind of what's out there in the zeitgeist. So does fact checking work? Yes, it does. The labels reduced that belief in the headline by about 28%, reduced the desire to share it by 25%. Even those who are in the bottom 25% of belief in fact checkers, these are the people who don't believe that fact checking is accurate. Even those people, their belief fell by 13% and sharing fell by 17%. And so having that warning label on there doesn't have a blowback effect. In fact, it does reduce the amount of sharing. This does still mean that even the average person was still 75% is likely to share something that had a "this isn't true" label on it, but hey, every little bit helps. Then climate change messaging. There's some lot of good evidence across Western, what they call weird countries, that are Western and rich and developed and industrial. Those countries, it's been tested that effective messaging is to say that 97% of science that there is human-caused climate change. 97% of scientists believe that. That's one of the most effective persuasion tools and helps people adjust the idea that there is a controversy in the literature. So 2 questions that this research study looked at. One is, what happens worldwide when you get outside of those countries? And then the other one is, now that 88% of scientists say that climate change is an urgent priority, what about that knowledge? Does it change people as well? So they put that out across 21 different countries. The list of authors on this study is long, and you can tell that they went through and got researchers from every country, which is a great way of doing it. So here are the results. They called the 97% messaging classic and the 88% updated. What you're looking at in A is that both classic and updated messaging helped people get closer to the number. So about 84% of people believe that, people believe that about 84% of scientists said that there is human-caused climate change, and that jumped up to the 90s with both the classic and the updated messaging. Then for scientific agreement, people updated their priors and it went to 88%. So people believed actually what the scientists are saying themselves. On the bottom, you can see that belief in climate change, belief in a climate crisis, and belief in human causation all went significantly up. But there was not a difference between the 2 messages. I'm sorry, 27 countries, not 20. My apologies. So belief in climate change, human causation, and worry about climate change all went up significantly, but neither message increased the we should change our behavior based on it, which is still the toughest nut to crack, but is likely following people believing it first, and then hopefully we will get there to supporting action against it. Any questions on those studies? Okay. This is, or I guess was, an intact vase and now is not an intact vase. What this is a 4-year-old boy going through the Hecht Museum in Haifa, Israel, saw this out and displayed, this Bronze Age jar, 3,500 years old, and touched it, knocked it over, and broke it, which is in line with every behavior I've ever seen from a 4-year-old. The Hecht Museum, not so much that the 4-year-old did this, but there was a great response by the museum. They said, you know, we believe that there's a special charm in experiencing an archaeological find without any barriers. They said, yeah, kids are kids. They invited the child and his parents to have a special tour of the museum separate from this. And they understand and just say, this is life in the big city. So as the parent of 2 kids who definitely would have smashed this vase, I'm very appreciative of this. This is a Royal Mail box, and you sharp-eyed viewers may note the note on it saying this is not in use because snails are eating the mail. I figured this was appropriate for folks who do some of their fundraising through mail. This is in Adderstone, a remote area of Northumberland. It's been out of use since July. The Royal Mail said that snails have been crawling in and munching the mail. It gives new meaning to snail mail. Apparently snails eat the paper because the cellulose for the wolf pulp gives them energy, and they also get calcium from the paper, which is used to build the shells. So that's our mailbox with true snail mail. This is a screenshot from the Black Myth Wukong video game, which I would not normally show here, but it applies to influencer marketing. So this is the story of Su Wukong, the Monkey King, a key journey in the Journey to the West. It's part of Chinese mythology, and this is one of the first big Chinese-produced video games out on the international market. And so as part of promoting this, they sent a guide to influencers who were going to be talking about their game with some of the normal things. Don't insult other influencers, don't use offensive language, but also don't talk about quarantine, don't talk about isolation, don't talk about feminist propaganda, don't talk about China's game industry policies, those sorts of things. And well, the internet is the internet. And so one of the influencers created a video about the game called COVID-19 Isolation Taiwan is a Real Company, Feminist Propaganda. Another influencer, Ru Zong, discussed China's one-child policy while playing the game. And so 138 people were, it says suspended, my apologies, from Weibo, which is their big social networking tool for gender opposition, personal attacks, and other irrational comments. But internet's going to internet all the world around. Harrison Ford just received a new honor. He had a snake named after him, a copper and black snake called Tachymonas Harrison Fordi. He said the discovery was humbling, but these scientists keep naming critters after me, but it's always the ones that terrify children I don't understand. I spend my free time cross-stitching. I sing lullabies to my basil plants so they won't fear the night. These are, Ford is also known for his environmentalism. And so that, a gentle soul behind the action hero. I do appreciate, however, that this can be summarized with snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?